When we talk about love, most of us immediately think of its light, its warmth, its beauty, the sense of belonging it gives. Love is often described as the ultimate form of happiness, the one thing we all crave no matter where we come from or what we believe. Yet, what we often avoid acknowledging is that the very depth of love is mirrored by the depth of pain it can carry. They exist together like two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without, at some point, confronting the other. This is the paradox of love and pain. The very thing that brings us the greatest joy also opens the door to our greatest suffering. Why does this happen? It's because love isn't a casual transaction. It's not a surface level exchange of pleasantries or temporary attraction. Real love requires investment, emotional, psychological, even spiritual. It demands that we let someone else in, past the walls we build to protect ourselves, into the most vulnerable parts of who we are. And the moment we allow that, we open ourselves up to risk. The deeper the bond, the sharper the ache when that bond is threatened or broken. That's why heartbreak doesn't just hurt in the mind. It hurts in the body, in the heart, in every fiber of our being. Love intertwines itself with our identity, and when it's shaken, we feel as if a part of us has been torn away. From a psychological standpoint, this is rooted in attachment. When we love deeply, we form bonds that are not only emotional, but neurological. Our brains release chemicals like oxytocin and dopamine that reinforce our connection, making love feel like both a comfort and a necessity. But when separation, betrayal, or even the fear of loss occurs, those same systems that once made us feel safe become the very engines of our pain. In other words, the greater the intimacy, the greater the potential for suffering. Love itself is not flawed. It's our awareness of its fragility that makes it so powerful and at times so devastating. Philosophically, thinkers have long argued that the beauty of love lies precisely in this tension. Without the risk of loss, love would lose its intensity. If we could love without ever fearing pain, it would become something shallow, transactional, almost mechanical. The depth of love is measured by the depth of what we stand to lose. The poet Khalil Gibran once wrote that the deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. It's a painful truth, but it explains why love is often remembered not just for the happiness it brought, but also for the scars it left. And yet, we continue to love, despite knowing the risks, despite knowing the inevitability of pain. We open ourselves to it again and again. Why? Because even with all its fragility, love is what gives life its richness. It's what makes our fleeting existence feel meaningful. The paradox of love and pain is not a curse, but a reminder of how deeply human we are, how capable we are of connecting beyond ourselves. So the next time you find yourself in love and you feel that ache of vulnerability, remember that the pain is not proof of weakness, it's proof of depth. To love deeply is to live deeply, and to live deeply is to accept that pain will sometimes walk beside joy. That paradox is not something to fear, it is something to honor. When we begin to understand love, not just as a feeling, but as a bond, we start to see why it makes us so fragile. Love is built on attachment, and attachment is one of the most powerful forces in human life. From the moment we are born, we rely on it. As infants, our survival depends on the presence of another. As we grow, we carry that same fundamental need into our relationships. We long to be seen, to be understood, to be held close. And when someone steps into our lives and fulfills that longing, the connection feels like home. But with that sense of home comes a profound risk, the fear that it might be taken away. Psychologically, attachment theory shows us that our deepest relationships are rooted in patterns of closeness and dependence that begin in childhood. The way we loved and were loved early on shapes how we approach intimacy later in life. When we give ourselves fully to someone, those old pathways light up. The relationship becomes more than just companionship. It becomes part of our sense of safety, part of our identity. That's why love, when threatened, can feel so destabilizing. It's not simply the loss of another person. It feels like the ground beneath us has shifted. But fragility doesn't mean weakness. It means humanity. Love exposes our most tender parts, the parts we usually keep hidden from the world. It asks us to risk rejection, to risk disappointment, to risk heartbreak. And yet it is precisely in that exposure that intimacy is born. We cannot be fully loved without first being vulnerable, without letting someone see us as we truly are. That is the gift and the danger of attachment. Philosophically, this raises an important question. Should we avoid such vulnerability in order to protect ourselves? Many try. They build walls, keep others at a distance, or bury their feelings under layers of detachment. But what they gain in safety, they lose in depth. A life without vulnerability may spare us some pain, but it also denies us the profound joy that comes from being fully known. To be fragile is to be alive, and to be alive is to risk being broken. This is where love's paradox deepens. The very thing that makes love fragile. Our openness, our exposure, is also what makes it extraordinary. If we never allowed ourselves to depend on another, to weave our life with someone else's, we would never experience the transformative beauty of true connection. Yes, it hurts when bonds are strained or broken. But that pain is the proof that love mattered. It shows that we cared deeply enough to be changed by someone else's presence in our life. So when you feel that fragility in love, when you catch yourself fearing loss or acting from it, don't mistake it for weakness. See it instead as evidence of your courage. It takes bravery to love in a world where nothing is guaranteed, where every bond carries the possibility of pain. That fragility is not something to be ashamed of. It is the heartbeat of our humanity. And perhaps the greatest act of strength is to keep loving fully and deeply, even knowing just how breakable we are. One of the most difficult truths about love is that it refuses to be controlled. We often go into relationships with the unspoken belief that if we love enough, give enough, or hold on tightly enough, we can guarantee its permanence. It feels comforting to think that devotion can protect us from loss. But love doesn't operate according to those rules. It is not a contract that secures certainty. It is an experience that thrives on unpredictability, and this is where so much of our pain comes from, not just from love itself, but from the illusion that we can control its outcome. Think about it when we fall in love. We don't simply enjoy the present moment. We start projecting into the future. We imagine where this love might take us, what kind of life we might build, how long it might last. That vision becomes precious and we start clinging to it. But the human heart, our own and the one we love, cannot be managed like a possession. People change. Circumstances shift, and sometimes, despite our efforts, the love we thought would be eternal takes a different course. The harder we try to hold on, the more painful it becomes when a reality doesn't match our expectations. From a psychological perspective, this struggle comes from our deep need for security. Our brains are wired to seek stability, to find patterns, to avoid uncertainty. Love, however, is unpredictable by nature. It exists in the unknown, where we cannot fully see or fully promise what tomorrow will bring. When we try to control it, we don't protect ourselves. We only set ourselves up for greater disappointment. True intimacy requires us to live with uncertainty, to recognize that love is always a choice made freely, not something we can demand or enforce. Philosophically, this raises a humbling realization. Control is often an illusion in many parts of life, but nowhere is it more evident than in love. We cannot dictate how another person feels, just as we cannot command the tides or the turning of the seasons. To love is to surrender, to accept that we can offer our heart, our presence, our devotion, but we cannot script the other person's responses. And perhaps that is what makes love so extraordinary. It is chosen, not coerced. Its beauty lies in the fact that it is freely given every day without guarantee. This is why many people confuse love with possession. They believe that to love someone is to keep them, to bind them, to ensure they never leave. But possession is not love. It is fear disguised as devotion. Real love allows space. It recognizes that both people are individuals with their own journeys, and it honors that freedom. Yes, that freedom means there is risk. But without risk, love loses its depth. Without uncertainty, it loses its authenticity. So the challenge is to release the illusion of control and instead embrace the vulnerability that comes with loving freely. It is not easy, but it is liberating, because once you stop trying to hold love in a tight fist, you discover that it flourishes best when it is allowed to breathe. And that's the paradox we must carry. The strength of love is not in our ability to keep it, but in our willingness to let it live without chains. Heartbreak is one of those experiences we all wish we could avoid, yet nearly every person who has loved deeply has faced it. And while in the moment it feels unbearable, as though the world has been split open, it also carries within it a strange and undeniable truth. Heartbreak is often the very thing that teaches us the most about who we are. Pain, especially the pain that comes from love, has a way of stripping us down to our most authentic selves. It pushes us to confront questions we might otherwise avoid. Who am I without this person? What do I truly need to feel whole? How much of my worth do I place in someone else's hands? In the silence that follows heartbreak, something transformative happens. The noise of shared life quiets, and we are left with ourselves. At first, this feels like emptiness, but with time, it can become a space for clarity. Psychologically, the loss forces our minds to adapt, to rewire. The brain regions that once lit up with closeness and affection begin to shift, creating new patterns that make space for resilience. Heartbreak hurts because it disrupts the deep attachment bonds that once gave us comfort, but it is also this disruption that opens the door to growth. Philosophers and poets have long written about this paradox. Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." Heartbreak is part of that chaos. It dismantles the illusions we build, not to punish us, but to reveal what lies beneath. The pain of loss reminds us that our identity cannot rest solely in someone else's hands. It must be rooted in ourselves. And once we rediscover that, we become not just stronger, but wiser, more empathetic, and more open to the experiences of others. Heartbreak also expands our capacity for compassion. When we have suffered, we recognize suffering in others. We understand loneliness in a way that theory alone could never teach us. That empathy, born from our own brokenness, is what connects us more deeply to humanity. We see that love, even when it wounds us, ties us to something larger than ourselves. A shared experience of being human, fragile, and yet capable of renewal. The greatest growth often comes not from the easy seasons of life, but from the ones that nearly undo us. It is in those moments that we build resilience, that we build a new kind of strength. Not the brittle strength of avoidance, but the flexible strength of someone who has walked through pain and still chooses to remain open. This is what makes heartbreak, in its own way, a gift. It reshapes us into people capable of deeper love, deeper understanding, and deeper gratitude for the fleeting beauty of connection. So, as much as we resist it, heartbreak is not just an ending, it is an invitation. An invitation to rediscover ourselves, to rebuild with wisdom, and to step forward into life not hardened, but expanded. And maybe that's the quiet triumph hidden in heartbreak, that it breaks us open only to reveal that we are capable of becoming more than we were before. When we look at love through the lens of history, philosophy, and culture, we find something fascinating. The connection between love and pain has always been recognized across time and across civilizations. The idea that love brings suffering is not unique to one culture or one generation. It's a truth that humanity has carried with it for centuries. In fact, some of our most profound art, literature, and philosophy exists precisely because people tried to give voice to this paradox. Take ancient philosophy. Plato spoke of love not as a possession, but as a longing, a recognition of something we cannot fully grasp or hold. For him, love was beautiful because it awakened desire for the eternal, but it was also painful because it reminded us of our incompleteness. That duality, love as both fulfillment and ache, runs like a thread through much of Western thought. Later, the Romantic poets took this even further. For them, the intensity of love was inseparable from the intensity of loss. Their verses remind us that the depth of emotion we feel in love can never be detached from the shadows it casts. Eastern traditions echo this same truth, though in different language. In Buddhist philosophy, attachment is seen as a root of suffering. The deeper we cling to something, the more we fear its loss, and the more pain we feel when it inevitably changes or slips away. Yet even here, the message is not to avoid love, but to approach it with awareness, to recognize its impermanence, and in doing so, to cherish it more fully while it lasts. Across cultures, art has always been the mirror where this truth reflects most vividly. Think of music, songs of heartbreak and longing have always topped charts, whether centuries ago in folk ballads or in today's global pop. Why? Because people see themselves in that pain. They hear their own story echoed in someone else's voice, and they find comfort in knowing they're not alone. Literature does the same. From Shakespeare's tragedies to modern novels, the stories that endure are often those where love's beauty is heightened by the inevitability of its pain. It seems we are drawn not just to tales of romance, but to the way those romances unravel or endure through struggle. Why does this resonate so universally? Because deep down, we all know love is fragile. We all understand, consciously or not, that to love is to risk loss. And instead of turning away from that, cultures across time have chosen to honor it by writing it, painting it, singing it, and philosophizing about it. It shows us that the link between love and pain isn't a flaw to be corrected, but a truth to be acknowledged, maybe even celebrated. And if humanity has always carried this truth, perhaps the lesson for us today is that we shouldn't resist it so fiercely. The pain of love doesn't diminish its value, it affirms it. The very fact that it hurts proves that it mattered, that it was real. So when you encounter that ache, when love leaves its mark in ways that feel unbearable, remember you are part of a story as old as humanity itself, a story where pain does not erase love's meaning but deepens it. After everything we've said about love, its fragility, its risks, its inevitable connection to pain, you might wonder, why do we continue to seek it? Why, despite the heartbreak, despite the uncertainty, do we keep returning to it again and again? The answer is simple but profound, because love, even with all its risks, is the one thing that gives life its deepest meaning. We are not built to live untouched by connection. We are not meant to harden ourselves to the point where nothing can reach us. Yes, when we love, we risk being hurt. But when we refuse to love, we deny ourselves the very experiences that shape us, soften us, and give us joy. A life without love may protect us from heartbreak, but it also strips us of richness. It is a life that may be safer, but it is also emptier, and human beings were not made for emptiness. Psychologically, choosing love again after pain is not about forgetting what happened. It's about relearning trust, not only in another person, but in ourselves. It's about believing that even if we were wounded, we are capable of healing. Neuroscience shows that our brains adapt and recover. That resilience isn't just a word, but a biological reality. Each time we allow ourselves to love again, we are rebuilding those pathways, teaching ourselves that vulnerability does not destroy us, it strengthens us. Philosophically, the act of loving again is an act of courage. It is a declaration that we will not let fear define us, that we will not let past pain dictate our future. In fact, to love again after being broken is perhaps the most defiant, life-affirming choice we can make. It says, yes, I know the risks. Yes, I know what it feels like to lose, but I choose to open myself again anyway, because the possibility of love is worth the possibility of pain. That choice is what makes us fully alive. When we choose love, even after betrayal, loss, or heartbreak, we honor the resilience of the human spirit. We say to ourselves and to the world that love is not diminished by pain. It is made more meaningful because of it. Every scar becomes a reminder not just of what we endured, but of what we were willing to risk for something greater than ourselves. And so the healing is not in avoiding love, but in embracing it more wisely, more deeply, more courageously. Love does not promise perfection. It does not promise forever. What it promises is the chance to connect, to grow, to be transformed. And that, in the end, is what makes life worth living. So, as you walk away tonight, I want you to carry this thought with you. The depth of your love will always carry the possibility of pain, but it is in that very risk that the beauty of life reveals itself. Do not fear the ache of vulnerability. Welcome it as proof that you are alive, that you are human, and that you are brave enough to love anyway.